Hi, and welcome to the I T'd Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 55. What can libraries teach us about privileged access management, PAM? So, libraries. Libraries are some of the coolest things on the planet. The concept is just amazing. And when I'm referring to libraries, I'm referring to the American concept of a public library, where you have this repository of books and knowledge, and it is free for everyone to access. The whole system basically works on public funds, but everybody can come in and basically pull a book out, read it, return it, get another book, and it's amazing. And libraries contain more than just books. They contain videos, and they contain video games now. You can actually go to a library, the public library here in Colorado. They offer 3D printers. They offer a VR room. They have classes that you can take to learn design. There's a lot of different things that our libraries now offer, and it's amazing. It's just this great repository of information. And they provide a service that I think is sort of why I do this podcast, which is I believe that the pursuit of knowledge is a basic human right. So if you are somebody who is wanting to learn, you have absolutely every right to go and find that information, and that information should be publicly available to you to learn how to do or learn about the natural world and everything that we do. Now, there's a lot of caveats to that, and I'm not going to get into politics of any of it because, who gives a shit? But the concept of libraries is amazing. But privileged access management. So what is privileged access management? There are a lot of different solutions that fulfill this term. There's a lot of confusion around what this term means. And a lot of it has to do with what people think they are using. And part of it is that there's some clever marketing with folks who offer solutions that are similar, but are not what privileged access management, it's not what privileged access management is. So the entire purpose of this episode is to kind of clear that up and define it in terms that you can take. And if you get asked a question on a test or are shopping for a solution, you know exactly what the hell you're doing. So in privileged access management, it is a concept of basically sharing access with multiple people to a privileged account, hence privileged access management, where you have a system that is designed to limit and control that access. And it can come in a lot of different ways. Some privileged access management systems allow you have to log in through the actual management console, and so that way your session is recorded. There's strict limitations to who and how many people can access that system at any one time, so on and so forth. The primary aspect of it is that in a privileged access management solution, your access is logged. You check the credentials out and you check them back in. Passwords are never duplicated. They are never the same, and they are rotated at every use. So it changes. And this is like a library, because when you check out a book, you now physically have that book in your hands, meaning you have taken that book out of the library. The library knows you have it. They know when they know when to expect you to return it. You know when you're supposed to return it. And there are consequences for you not returning the book within the time frame. And that is exactly how a privileged access management solution works. It checks out your credential. It checks out the administrative credentials or rights or however it's configured to work. It checks those privileged access means to you, and then you are able to use them for the period of time in which you've checked them out. And this all depends on how you've configured it, and again, what type of solution you have, because there are many different types of solutions of privileged access management. There's one where there are some where you log in through the privileged access management server, and then that's how you gain access to your downstream servers. There's also ones where you literally just check the credentials out, meaning you click the checkout button, then you get the password exposed to you. You use the password against whatever systems you need, and then you check it back in. And there are others that are access oriented. So you have things like you need a specific right or role assigned to your user. You check that role out. You perform your actions, and then you check that role back in. And those solutions are all privileged access management. And again, like a library, there are consequences for you not returning the credentials in on time. And this is more administrative than it is technical. So in a true privileged access management solution, there should be some sort of tracking for when a user does not log out or does not check their credentials back in. Because what that means is if you don't have a user who checks their credentials back in, they're not certifying that they've logged out of the account, and they are no longer utilizing the privileged access that credential allows. And this is hazardous in a lot of ways, because if you stay signed into a computer with administrative access, should an attacker gain access to that system and be able to take control of that session, that's bad. That's real bad. So as a general rule, you want your privileged access accounts to never be logged into a server for longer than they have to be. And that's part of what a privileged access management solution is supposed to avoid. Now, when you check out something in a library, you get a fine. Typically, there might be some limitation to how many books you can check out if you don't pay the fine. But you never stop getting full access to the library. That's just not how libraries work. But in a privileged access management solution, if you don't check your credentials back in, you should be prevented from checking them out. Like there is absolutely a maximum amount of credentials you are allowed to check out before you check any back in. And so, typically that limit is set pretty low, 1 or 2. I've seen as high as 5, but that limit should be set pretty low. And again, that's another characteristic of a privileged access management solution. So now that we've talked about what a privileged access management solution is, let's talk about what a privileged access management solution isn't. So it isn't a password manager, though it can share a lot of similar aspects of it. A password manager is a separate concept from a privileged access management solution. There are a lot of people who try to use password managers as privileged access management, but the configuration and limitations are not there in a password manager. So, for instance, and I'm going to use LastPass as an example because it's readily available, it's free, and you can mess with it if you want to. But LastPass, if you have a team account, you can share passwords across the teams. However, these passwords are just shared. There's no limitation. There's no automated rotation. There's no functionality that prevents somebody from persisting control of those credentials. Because if you don't rotate your passwords, anytime you share the password, then somebody just has that account. That it becomes uncontrolled. And that is the key aspect of a privileged access management solution, is that you your credentials always remain controlled. If you're just sharing out the password and then it never changes after you've used it, that's a problem. And that can be a significant issue. Another thing that a privileged access management solution isn't is it is not a self-review solution. So I should by no means be able to effectively elevate myself above control. And if I can, I'm not working in a privileged access management solution. The privileged access management solution should prevent somebody from elevating themselves beyond needing the use of the privileged access management solution. So if you're sharing out passwords and this privileged access management solution provides you with rights, and then that privileged access management allows you to basically elevate yourself to a point where you can assign rights that go beyond the privileged access management solution, that's a problem. That has now broken the privileged access management. And so, for instance, this comes into play with Microsoft's IAM. Now, you can use their identity access management solution you can use it as a privileged access management solution, but you have to be extremely careful with the rights and roles that you create. And in doing this, you have to basically craft your own roles, because what you don't want to do is, using IAM, you don't want somebody to be able to elevate another account to a global administrative account and give them permanent access, because that is something that often happens with IAM. Out of the box, it is not a privileged access management solution. You have to manually configure these things yourself. And if you don't, then you are effectively working outside of privileged access management. So if you're able to elevate yourself outside of the or be able to elevate yourself to gain control outside of the PAM, then it's not a PAM. It doesn't work, because you need to be able to continue to use the PAM solution to gain access to those privileged rights. Just like in a library, you're never just going to be able to steal or take the books out of the library willy-nilly. You're just never going to be able to do that. You always have to check them in. You always have to check them out, unless you're going to steal them, and then that's illegal. And then, that's outside of the whole thing. You can't do that. It's wrong. Don't do it. Especially not from a library. That's a hell special. That's the special hell right there. Stealing from a library. God, fucking thieves. Anyways, what a privileged access management ends up attempting to do is it is attempting to prevent the oversharing of credentials and prevent the unauthorized access of administrative accounts. So without a privileged access management solution, what you run into is in an IT team, you have the administrative accounts for various devices, and these come across in all flavors. And as we get closer to aggregating everything to portal logins, and we get better at making access unified across platforms, this becomes less of a problem. But this still exists, where we have specific things like switches or domains or, I don't know, printers, anything that uses a username and password to access administrative accounts. It is very difficult to create usernames and passwords for everybody on your team for every system. If you have 200 devices in your network and outside of computers that are not domain joined, they are not LDAP certified, which most aren't. Most of them can't communicate they can't authenticate properly through any of those means. Then they rely on basic authentication that exists on the system themselves. And so you have an admin password that you have to sign in and out of. and it has to be shared. And so this is what a privileged access management solution is supposed to avoid. It is supposed to avoid this exact circumstance. Now, there are a lot of solutions out there, and many of them spout a lot of different things, but most of the time, privileged access management only applies to Windows devices, which is kind of limiting because it's just easier to Windows devices because Windows devices make it easy to manage the passwords. Active Directory does a great job of all of that. So if you have a device like a Linux server or something like that, where you have a root password and you don't necessarily have the automated or the centralized automation of account control, a PAM solution can be harder to configure for those devices. And for instance, ESXi, which is a VMware product, which is a hypervisor, and there are plenty of other competitors out there, but I use this one for an example because it runs on a Linux-esque operating system, but it is not Linux. And it is extremely hard to add anything onto it. And so in order for a privileged access management solution to work, it has to basically operate through an SSH. It has to operate through SSH where there's a script that rotates that root password every time somebody uses it. And this can be very difficult for PAMs to do, but can also be an oversight of a PAM, because if they don't provide this kind of control, then it can really, really be hard to make that privileged access part of the PAM. And it ends up becoming a password manager for those accounts, which is wrong, which isn't privileged access management. It's just password management at that point. So when you're shopping around for solutions, you need to make sure that your privileged access management solution can handle Linux devices, ESXi devices, every device that you have in your network. If it can handle web credentials, even better. And by utilizing this and ensuring that you can do this, you can create yourself a fully fledged environment where you can check in, you can check your credentials out, you can use them, you can check them back in, you can rotate them. You can be sure that everybody has maintained proper access control. The chain of custody is never broken, and that if an attacker were to get into your environment and they even got control of a credential one time, that would change, and it wouldn't lead to a catastrophic failure where every book in your library has now been set on fire, and there you have a dancing imp torturing everything inside of your library. I was going to make a Fahrenheit 451 reference, but you know what? Fuck it. Well, that's all I got time for today, guys. I hope you have a great day.